For decades, invasive species and high levels of phosphorus have plagued Half Moon Lake. But after a recent round of herbicide and alum treatments, this lake in the middle of Eau Claire has been given a new lease on life. Phil Fleiber, Parks, Recreation and Forestry Department Director for the City of Eau Claire, has been leading the fight against invasive species in Half Moon Lake.
And our biggest enemy in Half Moon Lake has been the curly-leaf pondweed. It's a non-native plant. Once it takes hold, it's very difficult to eradicate. It's a plant that grows, it almost thrives in cold weather. Well, if you're in Wisconsin and you thrive in cold weather, you're going to grow like crazy. So it grows really well in the warm weather, but it also grows very well in cold weather. So it is a plant that has just took over Half Moon Lake.
Fleiber hopes that keeping the curly-leaf pondweed in check will increase biodiversity in Half Moon Lake.
We want to see a variety of native weeds. I mean, that makes for a healthy environment. That makes for a great fishing lake to have weeds in your lake. But we want to have a variety of different weeds. We don't want one species of weed, not any more than we want one species of tree in our city. You know, you want a variety, so that if one species is killed off because of some problem, that you don't lose your entire biological environment there.
Curly-leaf pondweed doesn't only affect biodiversity in the lake. Evan Wire, professor of botany at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, says that the weed also has an effect on the phosphorus levels in the lake water.
So yeah, curly-leaf pondweed is bad, partly because it does this thing in the spring where it can mine phosphorus from sediment, create this huge amount of biomass, then it dies back. That causes, right, that puts an oxygen demand on the lake water. And then as it rots, it's going to release a lot of phosphorus back into that water column again. And so that's probably going to be another thing that makes, as a positive feedback on poor water quality later in the summer.
Like many water systems in the Chippewa Valley, Half Moon Lake has very high levels of phosphorus in the water due to fertilizer runoff from farms upstream. Such high levels of phosphorus often lead to problems for lakes like Half Moon.
And so usually the issue is more phosphorus inputs leads to excess algal growth and poor water quality.
One way to deal with high phosphorus is through the application of aluminum sulfate, or alum, directly into the water.
Well, part of what the alum treatment was supposed to do was to capture the phosphorus that was in the water column and bind with it and take it to the bottom and actually seal it. So the phosphorus is still in the lake, but it's sealed. It has a layer of alum, aluminum sulfate on top of it. And aluminum sulfate is the same stuff that's in our Tums.
Wire thinks that the addition of alum to Half Moon Lake will do wonders to help get the lake back on track.
Oh, well, I guess the ideal thing would be to see increased clarity in the water and perhaps a reduction or an elimination of floating scums of algae in the late summer, early fall.
High phosphorus levels and the takeover by invasive species isn't unique to Half Moon Lake. Across the Midwest, lakes struggle with poor water quality and massive amounts of algae polluting the water. Fleiber hopes that, if successful, Half Moon Lake can be an example of how to combat these issues.
You know, this whole thing is kind of an experiment. There are a lot of people watching to see what happens in this lake, because if this is successful, there are a number of other lakes around Wisconsin and the Midwest that will want to replicate this